not only is the United States having a kind of strategic ambiguity, but China actually is also having a kind of ambiguity. But there is a fundamental difference. Chinese strategic ambiguity is based on its confidence over eventual peaceful reunification. Yeah, we still believe peaceful reunification is possible. So if China has not laid out a timeline, the United States, of course, would keep maintain its strategic ambiguity, right? But there is a difference between Americans' ambiguity now and Americans' strategic ambiguity in the past. In the past, it was based upon America's unquestionable military strength, yeah, vis-a-vis China. But now, I believe it's more like a fig leaf, yeah, covering Americans' inability to possibly win.
Well, it's interesting that you make that observation.
大家好，这里是感人四绝频道。刚才这段精彩集锦已经把本期访谈最有分量的观点摆在了我们面前。同样是战略模糊，中国的底气来自对和平统一仍然抱有信心，而美国如今的战略模糊却更像是在军事优势动摇之后用来遮眼镜退两难的遮羞布，说得更直接一点。过去美国靠实力让别人猜不透，现在却可能是自己也不敢把话说满，这样的反差确实值得玩味。本期节目我们继续对话退休大校周国，围绕日本最新防卫白皮书、国防预算扩张以及日本和菲律宾在第一岛链上的动作，看看这些所谓的安全布局究竟是在降低风险，还是不断制造误判。与此同时，解放军与印尼海军的联合演习、中国的导弹试射以及美国讨论战术核武器的动向也将被放进同一张战略地图中分析。更关键的是，当美国要求盟友投入更多、承担更大风险时，这些国家真的愿意替它冲在最前面吗？接下来，周大校会从军力、地理、预算和历史经验出发，拆解台海与西太平洋正在形成的新常态。
The first issue that I really wanted to get your perspective on is Japan's recently released 2026 Defense White Paper, which describes, quote, a new era of crisis in the Indo-Pacific, and once again labels China as Japan's, quote, greater strategic challenge. The white paper emphasizes rapid capability expansion, including unmanned systems, longer-range missiles, and closer coordination with the United States and other allied partners. How do you think Beijing would view this document, or certainly how would you view this document? And do you see Japan's accelerated military build-up as primarily defensive or as contributing to regional instability?
Well, you're having too many questions that are blended together, Powell. Well, I fully understand, because in the last 3 or 4 decades, I've been, hearing all those kind of complaints, coming from Japan, either identifying China as a threat or as a challenge, or they just look worried. But just let's imagine the worst scenario between China and Japan. What can it be? Yeah, because that would be actually the easiest starting point. Let's just imagine, okay, could we have a conflict whatsoever over Diaoyu Islands? I don't think so, because after the nationalization, the so-called nationalization of Diaoyu Islands in 2012, Chinese, Coast Guard sent ships, and we have been operating in the waters of the islands. And so was, Coast Guard of Japan. So they were there. We were. They are there. We are also there. But there is a kind of tacit agreement, because right now we do not have military ships from either side entering the 12 nautical miles, of the island, and we have not flown any aircraft over the island. So that is the status quo. So I believe there is a kind of tacit agreement. So apart from that, then if you say Chinese military is building up quickly, that is for sure. But that is not a secret. And we have made it quite clear that we want to become world-class military by 2049, right? But then, to what extent is China such a threat to Japan? Yeah, because I can hardly think of a scenario when China would decide to launch an attack on Japan, unless Japan becomes a supporter to the U.S. involving in contingency in Taiwan Strait. That is the only scenario I can think of.
Yeah, and in that sense, it's not really a question of China and Japan, then, is it? It's really a question of China and the United States, with Japan as supporting act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Nonetheless, the white paper, I think, seeks to paint a picture of a region, doesn't it? That's in incredible flux, a great deal of insecurity. Do you think that the position that Japan's adopted is actually contributing to making the situation more tense? And in fact, there needs to be, I guess, if people are serious about making things less tense, this is arguably not the right approach.
Well, I think Japanese politician remarks certainly are misleading out of their own panic and fear, or even hallucination, I would say. Because the biggest change in the attitude of Japanese government is after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and then the former Prime Minister, Kishida, said something that is very much catchy. That is, Ukraine today would be East Asia tomorrow, right? And when he was talking East Asia, I think he was hinting at China. But then, of course, we see this kind of drastic increase in defense budget. I always believe in international politics, there are two things that would tell you more than anything else about the true intention of a country. One is geography, another is defense budget. Yeah, if you look at the Korean Peninsula, if you forget what the leader of North Korea might be saying, but you look at the geography, which is not very big. It's just 1,000 kilometers or so. So, and then think, how could the North possibly launch a nuclear strike on the South? Then you come to the answer of this question, right? In spite of the bluff. Then on defense budget, the defense budget of a country would best tell, what this country think about its environment, about its relationship with other countries. Yeah, take China for example. China, of course, has been rising peacefully in the last 4 decades and plus, but China's defense budget, in spite of its steady decrease, is always around 1.5% or something. So that shows how confident and calm China is, in its assessment towards, as a region, including its assessment of the China-U.S. relationship. So China has never panicked, in spite of the such a serious incidents like a bombing on Chinese embassy, in former Yugoslavia by NATO, like collision of aircraft between Chinese and American aircraft, and that was resolved so skillfully in 11 days. And could you imagine 11 days ago, could this kind of a lethal accident be resolved so skillfully with just two sorries voiced by the United States, right? So I think Japan has a problem of miscalculation, about the regional situation, and that would have a kind of negative effect because previously Japan's defense budget is 1%, and now before 2027 it might become 2%. But what for? Japan is not really developing rapidly now. The Japanese yen is almost at its lowest in the last 40 years, right? So think about all this,
So in some ways, it despite the talk, which is often targeted more at a domestic audience, the capacity issues actually mean that um, it's not really able to match the big talk with the kind of walk that you would expect. Would that be a fair summary?
Well, let's talk about the Western scenario. For example, should China and Japan enter a conflict, is it possible at all for Japan to win over China? The answer is no, right? So, in this regard, the only role for Japan legally speaking, is to provide a kind of a legit support to the United States. Yeah, but even American involvement itself is questionable. And who can say for sure that the U.S. would be involved in a conflict in Taiwan Strait, right? So you see, not only is the United States having a kind of strategic ambiguity, but China actually is also having a kind of ambiguity. But there is a fundamental difference. Chinese strategic ambiguity is based on its confidence over eventual peaceful reunification. Yeah, we still believe peaceful reunification is possible. So if China has not laid out a timeline, the United States, of course, would keep maintain its strategic ambiguity, right? But there is a difference between Americans' ambiguity now and Americans' strategic ambiguity in the past. In the past, it was based upon America's unquestionable military strength, yeah, vis-a-vis China. But now, I believe it's more like a fig leaf, yeah, covering Americans' inability to possibly win.
Well, it's interesting that you make that observation because as a result of the conflict in the Persian Gulf, the war against Iran and the counterattack from Iran on American bases, there are now very serious question marks about the United States' ability to successfully and viably defend its forward bases anywhere in the world within range of medium-range missiles. Now, Elbridge Colby is the Undersecretary of the Department of War for Policy, and he has made remarks over the last few years effectively admitting that the balance of power in Asia is no longer in America's favor. And a part of his own view as to what the response should be is that America's regional allies need to step up, to spend more, to do more, to take on greater risks and those sorts of things. He was just in Manila in the last week or so, where he tried to convey the message that America was still heavily engaged in the Asia region, that America was not disengaging but digging in on the first island chain, whilst at the same time insisting that allies must invest more and more heavily in their own defence. He called them partners, not protectorates. How would you interpret Colby's message in Manila, particularly the balance that he draws between American forward posture and greater burden sharing by countries such as the Philippines?
这场访谈表面上讨论的是日本防卫白皮书、台海局势、南海动向以及美国在西太平洋的军事部署，但如果把这些议题放在一起观察，就会发现他们共同指向同一个核心问题：在力量对比快速变化的今天，各方究竟是在为安全增加保障，还是在用更强硬的姿态把整个地区推向更高的风险之中？周国大校的一个重要判断是，日本把中国定义为最大的战略挑战，并不断提高国防预算、扩充远程导弹和无人系统，未必意味着日本真的准备单独与中国发生战争。日本真正担心的可能是中美在台海发生冲突时自己被迫站队。但问题恰恰也在这里，一旦日本把自身安全越来越深地绑定在美国的区域战略之上，原本属于中美之间的竞争就可能被扩大成多个国家共同参与的对抗。对于日本来说，这是一种寻求保护的方式；对于中国来说，却可能被理解为军事包围和战略挤压、安全困境。就是这样一步步形成的，从钓鱼岛周边长期存在的海警活动，到日本和菲律宾讨论经济海域划界，再到中国海警和海军进入相关海域开展行动，视频里反复强调的一个关键词就是现状并不是静止不动的。所谓现状，往往只是各方暂时接受的一种平衡。而当一方的经济实力、军事实力和海上行动能力不断增长时，原有平衡自然会发生变化。更值得警惕的是，每一方都可能认为自己是在填补真空、维护权益、回应挑衅，但在另一方看来，却可能是在改变规则、扩大存在、试探底线。行动本身未必立即导致冲突，可是行动累积之后，误判的空间就会越来越小。印尼与中国在相关海域举行联合演习，也说明东南亚国家正在采取更加灵活的外交策略。 他们一方面需要美国提供安全支持，另一方面又无法忽视中国在贸易、投资、供应链和地区事务中的影响力。因此，所谓两边下注并不一定意味着虚伪，也可能是中等国家在大国竞争之间争取自主空间的现实选择。他们会在口头上保持伙伴关系，在经济上维持合作，在军事上设置限制，尽量避免本国领土成为大国冲突的前线。菲律宾允许美军使用基地，却对基地能否用于攻击设置条件，正体现了这种谨慎。因为任何国家都明白，战争一旦发生，最先承受代价的往往不是远方制定战略的人，而是提供机场、港口和补给线的国家本身。视频后半段谈到的导弹试射和二次核打击能力，更是把地区竞争从常规军事层面推向了战略威慑层面。中国通过远程导弹展示自身的生存能力和反击能力，美国则开始讨论在西太平洋冲突中是否保留战术核武器选项。这里最危险的地方不在于某一次试射本身，而在于当常规力量的平衡发生变化之后，任何一方都可能试图用更高层级的威慑来弥补不足。可核威慑一旦被频繁写入战略文件，公开讨论，原本用于防止战争的工具也可能变成制造恐慌和误判的因素。真正可靠的安全不是让对手相信自己一定会冒险，而是让对手相信即使发生危机，双方仍然有足够的沟通渠道和退让空间。这也是整场访谈最值得我们思考的地方。受访者认为，中国实力越强，两个大国之间直接爆发战争的可能性反而越低，因为战争代价变得更加难以承受。这个判断有一定逻辑，但它并不意味着风险已经消失。大国之间的战争未必来自某一方主动决定全面开战，也可能源于一次海空碰撞，一场军演失控，一次错误判断，或者某个政治人物为了国内舆论而说出无法收回的话。实力越接近，威慑越复杂，危机管理就越重要。任何一方如果只看到自己的力量增长，却看不到对手的安全焦虑，就可能把对方的防御行为误读为进攻准备。因此，降低台海和西太平洋风险最现实的路径仍然是恢复对话，建立更稳定的军事沟通机制，明确海空接触规则，并尽量把危机控制在可管理范围内。美国需要认真评估，持续增加第一岛链军事部署，究竟是在提升安全，还是在增加前沿基地和盟友被卷入冲突的概率？日本、菲律宾以及其他地区国家也需要问自己一个根本问题：本国的安全是不是必须通过不断靠近军事集团来实现？而两岸之间更应该避免把所有交流都视为政治陷阱，没有对话，误会只能靠猜测解决；有了对话，至少还保留着解释、谈判和降温的可能。归根结底，今天的东亚并不是简单的谁强谁赢，而是一个力量、利益、历史记忆和政治选择相互交织的复杂系统。真正决定未来走向的，不只是军舰有多少，导弹射得多远，也不只是某份白皮书写了什么，而是各方能否在拥有力量的同时保持克制，在坚持立场的同时保留沟通，在准备最坏结果的同时继续为和平留下道路。面对这样的局势，我们既不能被危言耸听牵着走，也不能因为暂时没有战争就低估风险。欢迎大家在评论区分享你的看法，关注地区安全和国际局势的朋友，也欢迎点赞订阅，观看更多精彩视频。